You are with me. I am with you. Who taught us that rhyme? I thought you made it up.
Hey, welcome back, ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Harriet, and this is all the Easter eggs, references, and little things you might have missed in the final episode of The Acolyte Season 1. Now that was some good Star Wars. I feel like they saved up all the good stuff for the finale. This episode directly set up the prequel trilogy, and now I'm kind of dying for Season 2. We have so much to talk about and break down, so let's get started. First, the title of this episode is The Acolyte.
He said it! He said it!
Now, all through the series, they were setting up May to be the Acolyte of the Sith, while Osha was supposed to be the good Jedi student. But just like the yin-yang symbol that pervades this series, we actually see that there is a little bit of good and bad in everyone, even in the Jedi and the Sith. But we'll talk about the episode's central theme of balance as we go through this episode. And before we go any further, I just want to thank you so much for watching this show with us all season long. We have loved covering it for you. And in honor of, the little green guy making a cameo at the end of the show, we have created this new Do or Do Not shirt for sale at our merch store. We have lots of other fun merch we've designed for you, such as the ability to speak doesn't make you intelligent, Darth Teeth, and what about droid attack on the cookies? Shopping our merch store really does help support our channel, and just thank you guys so much for watching. I really do have the best job in the world. So before we dive deeper into this episode, I want to address an important Easter egg that we've missed for the past 6 weeks. We have pointed out that Sol's name means sun, but the name Chimere is a variation of the Arabic word Qamar, which means moon. And these are not just cute little names. The names of these two masters actually underscore the meaning of this show. The Force is inherently made up of the dark side and the light side. The light side of the Force represents life, and the dark side represents death. Now, both of these sides exist as like neutral forces of nature. However, any Force-sensitive being can use the dark side for unnatural means. So because the light and dark side both exist in nature, together they create a kind of balance.
Life. Death and decay that feeds new life.
Now in this show, this balance is exemplified through May and Osha. As we'll talk about later on, they each have elements of both the dark and light side within them. The epitome of this balance is the yin-yang symbol. So the yin-yang represents harmony between the dark and light, just as the sun and moon exist in harmony in the sky. So Chimere and Sol, the moon and the sun, represent two celestial forces who are fighting for control of the sky. Also, remember the Force Coven bears the symbol of a yin-yang, and Kalnaka drew the symbol all over his hermit hut on Kofar. And the clue has been right in front of us all along in the opening titles, which always depict the O as two circles, one representing the sun or the light side and the other representing the moon or the dark side. And as we'll talk about a little later, this has huge implications for how this series sets up the rise of the Sith and the ultimate victory of Palpatine.
Help, 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 help!
Oh my god, what's wrong?
Are you on fire? Someone, help quick! He's on fire! Oh no, I'm not on fire, but I do have a big date that I need to impress because you see, this is true love.
True love? Well, then we gotta get you fixed up. Doug, do the thing.
Wow, thanks! She'll be so impressed by my appearance.
Not just yet, my friend. You need one last touch.
Wow, that smells great. What is that?
Well, my friend, this is Illusium by Roja. It's a high-end fragrance, but I was able to get it for just over $7 through Scentbird. They're the sponsor of this video. Before Scentbird, I never wore cologne, but this subscription makes owning cologne affordable, and now it's become an important part of my daily routine. You shower, you get spruced up, and the finishing touch is a little bit of cologne. Scentbird is a fragrance subscription service, and if you're new to wearing cologne, this is a great way to start. You see, Scentbird is great for guys like us because I have no idea what makes for good cologne, and I don't want to risk a bunch of money on an expensive bottle. Now, to educate me about the cologne, they sent along a descriptive card that explains the ingredients. This month, my favorite was Icon Ice by Zier. It is recommended for a night out or a day at the office, and personally, I think it's bold, but not too striking.
Ah, yes. And I'm also detecting amber, cedar, and musk.
Wow, you really do have a great sense of smell. So guys, these samples are actually 8 times bigger than the normal sample size you get at a store. Plus the bottles are small and portable, perfect to take on vacation. You can choose a designer fragrance every month for just $17. You get a 30-day supply, and you get to pick what you want to receive, so there are no surprises. This is a great way to learn about cologne and find out what you like without spending hundreds of dollars on an expensive bottle. Plus, you can skip any month with no penalty. So if you want to give Scentbird a try, click this QR code and use our code 55CRUSH and click the link in the description to get 55% off. That's just over $7 for your first month, available in the USA and Canada. Thanks again to Scentbird for sponsoring this video. Check out our sample links below. Now, back to the Acolyte. So the episode picks up where episode 6 left off, with Osha surrounded in darkness and breathing. Very similar breathing to Darth Vader. In our episode 6 breakdown, we talked about how Osha cutting off her senses from the physical world is of course similar to Luke doing the same in A New Hope.
This time, let go your conscious self and act on instinct.
But here, there's also a deeper metaphor, because Osha is also cutting herself off from the light. When she is surrounded by this darkness, she is cut off from the rest of the world, and she is alone with her emotions. And as we learn in just a few moments, her emotions are what actually drew her to the dark side of the Force. So in this scene, as she touches the dark side of the Force, she accidentally invades Kymir's mind, just like how her mother invaded the mind of Padawan Torben in episode 7. I loved this sequence. It was so interesting to see her invading Kymir's mind, but portrayed like Frodo putting on the One Ring and seeing the ring wraiths. But unlike Master Torben, Kymir is able to overcome this use of the dark side, which the show portrayed visually by showing his eyes change from black to normal pupils in the real world. Osha thinks that she saw a vision of May killing Master Soul, when in fact she saw a vision of herself doing the same thing, because as we learn in this episode, she and May are the same person.
Yeah, how did that work anyways? I didn't quite understand that.
Don't worry, we'll explain a little later and how all of this sets up this guy.
I don't like sand.
Like our Kill Sand merch for sale at our merch store.
She had her hand outstretched.
Now, the vision of herself with an outstretched hand is very interesting. We see both Jedi and Sith use the Force with an outstretched hand, sometimes to move rocks or sometimes to choke a mouthy lieutenant. But how you use the Force is what actually determines whether the Force is good or evil. Kymir recognizes right away that she had a vision.
This is the future you saw.
Now, we've pointed out in the past how Kymir is acting very similar to Yoda, with both of them even making bowls of soup for their potential Padawans. And here, his wording is even similar to Master Yoda's.
This is the future you saw.
It is the future you see.
And much like Luke Skywalker, Osha is convinced that she can save the person that she has an emotional attachment to.
But the future isn't fixed. I can still stop her.
I can save him. I can turn him back to the good side.
So then we go back to Brendok. So this is where May is able to control Soul, not by using the Force, but by manipulating his emotions. As she pushes his buttons to agitate him, she is secretly using evil Pip to pick the locks that hold her to the table. Remember, Pip's light turned red whenever May hacked him, similar to when Leia's droid Lola was hacked in the show Obi-Wan Kenobi. Soul wants to prove to the Jedi Council that Brendok is secretly a vergence in the Force.
What's a vergence?
Well, a vergence is technically defined as a point where two things that are alike start to diverge, such as the fold in a piece of paper. But in Star Wars, a vergence is a place where the Force ripples. This is why Mace Windu was surprised that Anakin was a vergence in the Force.
Located around a person?
As we learned in this episode, this vergence on planet Brendok allowed Mother Anasia to use the Force to create life.
Like Anakin.
Who was his father?
There was no father.
Yes, exactly like Anakin, except Anakin was created as just one person, whereas May and Osha are essentially one person who has been created twice. Now, all of this sets up Darth Plagueis in the prequel trilogy and even the Rise of Skywalker, but I'll talk about that later in the video. May and Soul argue their different points of view, which has been a running theme of this show, presenting the same events from different perspectives. And I loved how Master Soul kind of disintegrates in this scene. He becomes so agitated because of his past sins and guilt that he doesn't notice that May has escaped. May runs to the escape ship, very similar to the small ship the Phantom that was part of the Ghost in Star Wars Rebels. And then she says,
See you in hell, Jedi.
which seems like a bit of a callback to Han Solo dropping the very first Star Wars curse word in The Empire Strikes Back.
I'll see you in hell.
And I want to quickly flag the symbol on her helmet. No, this is not a Rebel Alliance symbol. This is a Jedi symbol from the High Republic era. And we also see Vernestra Rwoh wear this on her robes later in the episode. Now I think it is very cool how this looks similar to a traditional Jedi symbol of a lightsaber that we saw in the prequels, but it also looks similar to the Phoenix Squadron symbol created by Sabine Wren, which would eventually become the symbol of the Rebel Alliance and later the New Republic. So in a way, the Rebellion and the New Republic are carrying on the legacy of the Jedi Order. And then May tries to escape through the rings of this planet, of course very similar to the asteroid chases in episode 2 and 5 of the Skywalker saga. And Soul's targeting computer is very similar to Luke Skywalker's in his X-Wing cockpit in A New Hope. They even make similar sounds. But, as Dante Bruno on Twitter points out, the target reticule itself is like a TIE fighter's. Now, I don't think that's a coincidence. This episode keeps finding subtle ways to demonstrate the good and bad in each character. And I have to once again shout out the incredible composer of this series, Michael Abels. In this sequence, he's able to give us a John Williams-esque elegant spaceflight theme. But at other points in the episode, his music turns dark and foreboding and really creepy. I thought this whole spaceflight looked amazing, and it shows where that $180 million budget went to. Inside May's cockpit, her proximity alarm beeps. And this is the same sound effect as the Millennium Falcon's alarm that we see in A New Hope.
What's that flashing?
On Coruscant, we see Vernestra Rwoh working out of a skyscraper, which I think is a building that's dedicated to Jedi security. It's interesting that this building is no longer in use or even exists during the prequels, and I think that's because of the increased oversight of the Jedi that we see begin in this episode. And then we meet Senator Raincourt, who wants the Senate to have governing control over the Jedi Council. He lays down a pretty convincing case against the Jedi.
I think the Jedi are a massive system of unchecked power, a delusional cult that claims to control the uncontrollable.
But his most damning accusation cuts right to the heart of the Jedi's biggest weakness, controlling their humanity.
We don't control the Force.
Not the Force, your emotions.
Look, you guys watch the channel and you know how much I love my politics in Star Wars. I wish we could have seen this entire storyline unfold throughout the entire season and not just in the past couple episodes. This scene is excellent because it serves two functions. One, it establishes character flaws of Jedi like Sol. As we see in this episode, Sol's attachment to Osha and his desire to have a Padawan led him to commit evil acts. His emotions and attachments clouded his judgment. And we also learned that Osha washed out of the Jedi Order because she could not get control of her hatred. But this scene also sets up the dynamic between the Senate and the Jedi Council that we see in the prequels. In the High Republic books, the Jedi Council was very much an independent body that operated separately from the Senate. But by the time of the prequel trilogy, the Jedi operate as an extension of the Senate, even serving as commanders of the Republic clone forces without question. And not for nothing, Raincourt was right.
But it's only a matter of time before one of you snaps.
As we all know, the Jedi that snapped is one Anakin Skywalker. But his warning might actually give Vernestra Rwoh the idea to frame Sol later in the episode. He also mentioned,
I was surprised when they said you were traveling through hyperspace. How was your stomach?
and we've talked about this in past videos, but in the High Republic books, Vernestra Rwoh receives visions when she is in hyperspace. One such vision showed her lightsaber whip that she later constructed, and I still think that if there's a season 2, she will see the vision of the one who will bring balance to the Force and lay down that whole prophecy that we heard about in the prequels. Back on the mystery Sith hideout planet, Osha is now wearing darker clothes. So this symbolizes her movement toward the dark side, just as Luke Skywalker wore progressively darker clothes in each movie of the original trilogy. And then, oh my god, guys, look.
Who's that?
My little dude, that is Darth Plagueis. At least he looks like the Darth Plagueis from Legends, and we hear the Darth Plagueis theme. This is Palpatine's master that he slayed in his sleep. I'm going to explain Darth Plagueis, and I'm going to talk about this Darth Plagueis novel that is technically considered Legends material. But creators like Dave Filoni and Leslie Headland are picking certain materials from Legends and making them canon. So I think it's very possible that a lot of what happens in this book is going to become canonized in the Star Wars universe. So in this book, we see Palpatine and Plagueis try to create a Force dyad by working together to be able to sustain their life forces and live forever. Palpatine, of course, hinted about this in Revenge of the Sith.
He could use the Force to influence the midi-chlorians to create life.
And in this episode, we learned that May and Osha were actually one of the first attempts to use the midi-chlorians to create life. Plagueis' presence in the show even sets up the rise of Skywalker. Remember when Palpatine learned that Rey and Ben Solo were a Force dyad? He was able to use their energy to restore his body, and his quest for eternal life begins here in the Acolyte. I also wonder if Plagueis was responsible for Osha slipping to the dark side when she wore the helmet. Plagueis would have a strong interest in Osha because she was created through emergence in the Force, so he would want to test and manipulate her power for his own use. This episode also continued to tease that Vernestra Rwoh might be up to no good. For instance, we hear her talking to a mysterious person.
This is highly unorthodox, but I shall see what I can do.
And that mysterious person even sounded a little bit like Palpatine. But I think she was actually just talking to somebody who, like works in Yoda's office. But then she also gathers Jedi together in secret so she doesn't have to report this incident to the Jedi Council. However, I don't think she's actually trying to hide information from the Council. We did learn a few episodes ago that the Council is obliged to report events like this to the Senate, and I think that she and the High Council are trying to prevent Senate interference in Jedi affairs, and this is why she is so secretive throughout this season. In past episodes, we've pointed out how the fortress on Brendok uses triangles in its design, and even these buttons on the elevator are made of triangles. I also appreciate how they're made of like bright primary colored buttons, almost like a toy you would see in the 1980s, like Simon. Isn't that funny? Like, kids today, they have iPhones and video games. In the 80s, we just had like a box that beeped, and then you had to repeat the beeps, and this was considered a fun, expensive toy.
Simpler times, huh?
Sol arrives at the bridge where he left May to die, forcing him to relive his greatest failure. And again, we're seeing him slowly fall prey to his own emotions. We very slowly hear the witch's chants from when they possess Kalnaka. Just like the Senator warned, we are seeing a Jedi lose control of his emotions. And then, fittingly, May emerges from the pit where he left her to die.
You can't get rid of me, bitch!
And then we get to see the best fight of the series, and I'm going to go ahead and say this is an all-timer Star Wars fight. The sun versus the moon. The fight begins in a hallway, and you guys know how much I love a good hallway fight. The Vader hallway fight from Rogue One gets all the attention, but remember, his first hallway fight in Star Wars was against his son in The Empire Strikes Back. Just like in that fight, in this one, the Sith Lord tries to keep the Jedi off balance by forcing them backwards on their back foot. I love seeing the devastation the lightsabers do on this walkway. It's a subtle way of showing how this violence in the Force is destroying the very thing that's keeping them alive. And then Sol uses the Force to slow his descent. Now, I do think this is slow motion, but I loved how they used wire work in this scene. The show started off with an awesome wire work fight inspired by classic kung fu movies, and I am so glad to see this technique return in the finale. It makes perfect sense for Force users to fight like this, making them appear to be lighter than air. And then Darth Teeth detaches his lightsaber and turns one of them into a shorter wakizashi sword. Now, in feudal Japan, samurai would use swords like this for close quarters combat, or to commit ritual suicide or seppuku. I'm actually wondering if the Sith have this sword in order to take their own life in case they are ever discovered by the Jedi. I mean, this was just such a cool reveal, and I love how it draws on Japanese history, because feudal Japan was a key inspiration for George Lucas's original Star Wars films. Notice how the Sith uses this double saber to continue to push Sol backwards to keep him on his back foot and off balance. He uses the longer sword for attack and the shorter to deflect Sol's blade. And you can even tell that Chimere is fighting blind. He doesn't ever have to face Sol when he attacks him. He's able to swing his blade behind him and always find Sol with accuracy. I especially love this moment when Sol goes underneath Chimere's arm and pins him and then uses his saber to deflect Chimere's longer blade. Then Chimere tries to force pull his shorter blade back into his hand, but Sol interrupts the gesture with another kick-ass wirework maneuver. Chimere responds by hurling both lightsabers at Sol, probably with the intention of force pulling them back through him and killing him. Very similar to how Kylo Ren killed Snoke in The Last Jedi.
Bitch is crafty.
But instead, Sol force pushes in all directions, deactivating the lightsabers and knocking back Darth Teeth. It is just such a kick-ass fight and exactly what I want to see from Star Wars. Gregor Wilderman on Twitter noticed that this little bit of wreckage actually looks like an X-Wing's engine. Great catch. And then May and Osha finally have their own emotional and physical confrontation. Osha reveals that the reason she washed out of the Jedi wasn't because she was weak with the Force, which is what was implied in the first episode. She actually failed because she cared too much.
He tried to teach me to accept that someone that I love could be capable of this level of destruction, and I failed.
So all through this season, we've been led to believe that May was the evil twin and that Osha was the good twin. But like a yin-yang symbol, the good and bad people actually have both good and bad within themselves. We find out that May has a relatable motivation for going on a Jedi murder spree.
Sol killed our mother. I saw it with my own eyes.
And Osha was actually the person who was harboring a tendency to the dark side all along when she couldn't let go of her hate. So it is appropriate that here the twins have now switched outfits, with Osha wearing black and May wearing white. Then they engage in a good old-fashioned kung fu fight, and the framing of the fight also evokes a yin-yang symbol, with each of them occupying equal sides of the frame. And I loved the smash cut of their legs to the lightsabers. Right here, just listen to the screech that these sabers make. We always see lightsabers as these elegant weapons that make cool humming sounds when they swing around. But this sound really emphasizes that these are murder sticks that could burn you to a crisp. When Sol finally gains the upper hand, Chimere takes off his helmet to look him in the eye. But then May shows up just in time to hear his confession. And this is when Chimere sees his opportunity to finally get the Acolyte that he has always wanted.
Good, May. Feel your anger.
Now, of course, this is very similar to what Palpatine says to both Luke and Anakin Skywalker.
Good. I can feel your anger.
But this isn't just member berries. This is showing us the Sith's technique of converting apprentices that has actually existed for 1,000 years. But instead, May, who remember is supposed to be the evil twin, tosses away the saber like Luke Skywalker in Return of the Jedi and chooses justice instead of revenge, calling back to the title of the first episode. Chimera then utters another familiar phrase.
Strike them down, and your journey will be complete.
Strike me down with it. Give in to your anger.
Because again, the Sith would have been telling this to potential Sith for centuries, and then Osha overhears Master Soul's confession.
And you killed her.
Yes.
And then, oh gosh, she slowly chokes the life out of him like the jellyfish bird that she toyed with in episode 3. Then, oh my god, man, that soul that ran down Master Soul's cheek, it's just masterful and heartbreaking. All season long, Chimera has told May that her final test to become a Sith was to kill a Jedi without a weapon.
If you attack a Jedi with a weapon, you will fail.
Now, Darth Vader faced the same test in the comics, and I loved this scene. When May finally kills Master Soul, we see the lightsaber kyber crystal crack and turn red. So this is a process called bleeding the kyber. When a Sith fully turns to the dark side, the captured lightsaber from a Jedi Knight is overcome with this dark side energy, it cracks and then turns red. Now, we saw this in the Fallen Order Survivor game, but this is the first time we've ever seen this happen in live action, and it was just so tragic. All Osha ever wanted was to become a Jedi. And if Soul would have just let events unfold naturally, her mother would have let her join the Order. But instead, he was overwhelmed with his desire for a Padawan, he let his emotions get control of him, and he screwed up everything. So this also means that there were no witnesses to report back that the Sith have returned. So all you continuity hawks who were so mad at the first trailer, now find out why Coyote Mundi says this.
The Sith have been extinct for a millennium.
Afterwards, Chimera holds out his hand and makes her an offer.
Come with me.
We have seen similar offers many times in Star Wars. Darth Vader extends a hand to Luke, Kylo Ren extends a hand to Rey, except this time, the Jedi student actually decides to join the Sith Lord. As we theorized in the past, Vernestra does have a connection to Chimera.
You're alive.
We pointed out how the marks on his back look very much like they were made by her lightsaber whip, and when she steps into the courtyard, she senses echoes through the Force of what happened 16 years ago. Now, the ability to sense Force echoes is a power we have seen several times, most notably from Cal Kestis in the Fallen Order games.
And also when Rey touched Anakin's saber, but didn't see that he killed a bunch of kids.
Right, so Vernestra Rwoh has brought a contingent of Jedi to investigate what happened here, and most of them are just like background extras. But fans of the High Republic novels and the TV show Young Jedi Adventures will recognize this person. That's your mom. May and Osha escaped through the same tunnel that saved Osha's life years ago, and she says,
When I felt I got sucked into this core tunnel.
Now this is exactly what happens to Luke in The Empire Strikes Back, and the tunnels look exactly the same as well. Remember, Luke falling into that tunnel is what set him on a path to the dark side, with him being tempted to join Palpatine and kill his dad in Return of the Jedi. And when little May escaped through this tunnel, that set her on a path to the dark side, and now Osha is escaping through the tunnel when she is on a path to the dark side as well.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
Then May leads Osha to the tree where we saw them meet in episode 3. Remember, this is a Boomta tree. This creates a deadly poison that May used to kill Torben in episode 2. So I think this tree is symbolic of the Force itself. It is very beautiful and filled with life, but it can also be used to kill. So it's fitting that this is where May and Osha finally reconcile. In a way, it's like they have finally found balance through one another. And then they recite their rhyme.
You are with me. I am with you.
But I thought this was very interesting.
Who taught us that rhyme?
I think the reason neither of them know where the rhyme came from is because this is actually the spell that their mother used to create them. And so they were created knowing this incantation from birth. Chimera does a Jedi mind wipe as the Jedi cops close in. Osha says,
I give you hell.
Which is a way of saying that May's quest for revenge is over, and now she can finally live her life as she wants to.
Hey, I have a question. Why can't May escape with Chimera and Osha?
Well, because his ship only seats 2 people, and that is by design. The Sith embrace the rule of 2, that there can only ever be a master to hold power and an apprentice to crave that power.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Yeah, and a lot of people also didn't like that Chimera was able to mind wipe May, but I thought this made perfect sense. It explains how the Sith could have stayed hidden for 1,000 years. They would use their flashy thing anytime someone discovered them. It's also useful if you need someone to work as your operative without them remembering that they were your operative. Back on Coruscant, Vernestra is wearing a very fancy white and gold Jedi robe, and these collars and style were more common in the High Republic era. And I just want to note here that her chair looks very much like Emperor Palpatine's. It's a subtle way to show that the Jedi Jedi are beginning to play politics, and this will eventually lead them into being controlled by a Dark Lord of the Sith. When May is brought before her, she says,
"Leave us."
And then says to remove her handcuffs. This is very similar to what Palpatine said when Luke was brought before him.
Guards, leave us. You no longer need those.
But again, this is not just a member-berry Easter egg. We're seeing the good guys use dialogue from the bad guys and vice versa. This is similar to how the yin-yang symbol shows a little bit of its opposite color in the center. No one is all good or all evil. Also, Nick Panev on Twitter pointed out that the communications console she talks into is exactly like the one that Han used in A New Hope.
Everything's perfectly all right now. We're fine. We're all fine here now. Thank you. How are you?
Then, at a special council review by the Chancellor and the Senators, she frames Sol to protect the image of the Jedi Order.
A rogue Jedi named Sol killed his accomplices to maintain the cover story.
But, as we know, this will not be enough to save the Jedi from the Senate's interference, and this will eventually lead to the downfall of the Jedi Order. But the Jedi also fell because of the warning that Senator gave Vernestra. The Jedi's inability to control their emotions leads to the corruption of Anakin Skywalker and the creation of the Galactic Empire. She even says,
"He justified every selfish step with the love he had for your sister."
Which again foreshadows the reason that Anakin fell to the dark side, his love for Padme. The Chancellor, by the way, is a Tarsant, and this Senator is an Abenetto.
Troy and Abenetto in the morning.
So then we see Vernestra burn Sol in a Jedi funeral pyre, just like we first saw in Return of the Jedi, but then again at Qui-Gon's funeral in The Phantom Menace. And when she tells May about Chimere, she uses the same wording as Obi-Wan in A New Hope.
A pupil of mine, before he turned to evil.
A young Jedi named Darth Vader, who was a pupil of mine until he turned to evil.
Which I think has to be foreshadowing that she is hiding something, just as Obi-Wan was hiding the whole truth from Luke Skywalker. Back on Sith Planet X, Chimere and May hold hands. They intertwine their fingers around the red lightsaber, symbolizing their unity through the dark side of the Force. And also, let's face it, they're gonna smash. Now, the framing of this ending is deliberately echoing the endings of the darker Star Wars films. Attack of the Clones, Empire Strikes Back, and Revenge of the Sith all ended with just a few characters looking out at the horizon, whereas the happier endings like A New Hope and Return of the Jedi and The Phantom Menace ended with a large group cheerful shot. This seems to also echo the ending of The Rise of Skywalker with Rey looking at the Tatooine sunset. The message here is clear. This is not the end, this is the beginning. And then we see who Vernestra Rwoh has been secretly reporting to this entire time. Yoda. I think it's likely that Yoda did know about all of these events as they were unfolding, but he asked for Vernestra to keep this information a secret from the Council so they wouldn't have to involve the Senate.
Jeez, I thought Yoda was a good guy.
Oh, we have seen Yoda keep secrets like this before. He hid the Dark Lord of the Sith from the Senate during the prequels.
Only the Dark Lord of the Sith knows of our weakness. If informed the Senate is, multiply our adversaries' will.
And in the High Republic books Phase 2, he did not report the presence of a monster called the Leveler, even though this thing basically fed on Jedi and sucked the Force out of them.
Tired Yoda is. Resign he will.
Now, I am curious how Darth Plagueis is going to fit into all this. Earlier, we discussed his plans to obtain eternal life, plans that are later co-opted by Palpatine. But if he is Chimere's master, that means that Chimere cannot take on a new apprentice because of the rule of 2. So, is Plagueis trying to replace Chimere with Osha, or was Chimere never a Sith at all? After all, he doesn't admit to being a Sith.
But a Jedi like you might call me Sith.
This show left a lot of unanswered questions that I hope get answered in a second season. So guys, that's our coverage of The Acolyte. Thank you so much for watching. We do have a review video and a couple other videos coming out soon. Overall, I really like the concept of the show and the performances and where it fits in the Star Wars canon. But I do think the production value failed the show's concept at several points. And just a reminder everyone to give Scentbird a try, click this QR code and use our code 55CRUSH and click the link in the description to get 55% off. That's just over $7 for your first month, available in the USA and Canada. But let me know what you thought of The Acolyte and if you want to see a season 2. What did you think of the finale? Let me know in the comments or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.